Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 75. Expeditions, Usurpers, and War. Last time, we saw Antiochus turn his attention towards the east and towards Artabazanes. This was the ruler of Media Atropatene, and supposedly a grandson of the old Persian king Darius III. Well, today we'll see that we aren't quite dealing with a blaze of glory sweeping eastwards towards the old border with India. First off, I want to digress quickly to dig into this claim of Achaemenid ancestry and see whether there could be any truth to it. Now, I don't know a birth date for Artabazanes, but if we assume that he was about 30 at this point, this would give him a birth date of roughly 250 BCE. By contrast, Darius III is given a birth date of about 380 BCE in everyone's favourite popular source. That's a time difference of about 130 years. Not that this big difference necessarily means that it's untrue. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, was born in 1790. As of 2020, he had one grandson still living, Harrison Rufin Tyler. Harrison's father, Lyon Sr., was born in 1853 and was a septuagenarian by the time his son was born. The younger Tyler was born in 1928, making him born a full 138 years after his famous grandfather. If we take those sorts of numbers, a grandson of Darius III could have been born in about 242 BCE, which aligns with what we've seen here. However, given how old all of these people were when they had the relevant children, it seems unlikely. Anyway, less about family trees, more about campaigns. Antiochus III departed Seleucia and moved over the Zagros Mountains. When he saw the Seleucids show up, Artabazanes accepted the inevitable and submitted, making peace on Seleucid terms. So that's that done. It might feel a bit hollow after we were building up the Eastern campaign last episode, but don't worry, we'll have plenty to discuss today anyway. Now, it would have been dangerous for Antiochus to throw himself into reconquering the entire east of the empire, while Ptolemy IV and co were a threat on the western border. So, the plan was to turn around and go back home. At the same time, something dramatic took place in the court. If you remember from last episode, Hermias was hoping that Antiochus III would die while fighting in the east. As a consequence, Hermias hopes to have power over a new baby king who would therefore be Antiochus IV. However, Apollophanes, the doctor to the king, worked out what Hermias was plotting. Polybius says that Apollophanes was afraid of Hermias' unchecked power, both on the king's behalf and for the sake of his own safety. Despite it being dangerous for Apollophanes to tell Antiochus, because he didn't know how much influence Hermias still had over him, Apollophanes came clean. He entreated Antiochus to remember what had happened to Seleucus III, no doubt still a sore spot for the king, despite the murder having happened about 4 years ago by now. Antiochus told Apollophanes that he himself wanted Hermias out of the way. Added to that, there was no shortage of people who wanted the same thing. However, even with Antiochus backing a plan to get rid of him, they had to tread carefully. So it was arranged that the king would pretend to be ill with dizziness so that Apollophanes would have regular access to his majesty. The quarters of the king became the home of a conspiracy. Eventually, the plan sprang into action. News got out that Antiochus III had been told by his doctor to take dawn strolls to get some fresh air. Hermias couldn't resist temptation, and exploited the opportunity to get closer to the king. I'm not quite sure why, but Polybius doesn't seem to say it's anything sinister. However, it wasn't just Antiochus who was out and about. So were the others who involved in his schemes, a little way off. As Hermias and Antiochus walked, they eventually came upon some secluded area outside their camp, with the king retreating a little way, presumably claiming a call of nature or something similar. When he did so, the others attacked and cut Hermias down. So, that's the minister gone. The shadow over the throne has been lifted. Edwin Bevan says that there was jubilation throughout the empire when the news broke, with the royal army being greeted happily wherever they arrived on their way back. In Apamea, the women of the city promptly stoned Hermias' wife to death, while the young of the city did the same to his sons. Antiochus III arrived back in Syria at the close of 220 BCE, and let his troops go home for the winter. However, he arrived to find problems in the western sphere. Achaeus, the king's cousin, had felt certain something bad would happen to Antiochus while he was out in the east fighting Artabazanes. Accordingly, Achaeus set off with the aim of crossing into Syria from Anatolia, hoping for local support and to take the region before Antiochus returned, if he ever did. At Laodicea, Achaeus declared himself a king. Achaeus faced the same issue as Molon, namely, the Greeks and Macedonians refused to march against their rightful king. Achaeus initially tried to hide the target of their march, but by the time the army got to the Cilician Gate, the soldiers figured out they were going to fight against the king's cause and became mutinous. Edwin Bevan draws parallels to the Persian prince Cyrus the Younger when he says that Achaeus pretended they were actually going to fight the Pisidians in the mountains, who were causing havoc in Anatolia. When the Pisidians were dealt with, he got back into the good graces of his soldiers by means of the booty he took. I'm reading this to mean that Achaeus simply changed the target of their march, waited until the soldiers were a bit happier again, and then set off against the king once more. I'm going to take another opportunity to diverge a bit here to specify who Cyrus the Younger is. To do so, we'll need to go back to the days of the Persian Empire. When Artaxerxes I died in 424 BCE, his son Xerxes II succeeded him. However, he was killed after he'd ruled for just 45 days, killed in his sleep after he'd been drinking. The deed was done by his half-brother and successor Sogdianus. However, Sogdianus would in turn be overthrown by his brother Darius II. Darius and his half-sister wife Parysatis did not accept his claim on power and dislodged him after a little over half a year. Darius II had two sons we need to focus on, Artaxerxes and Cyrus. Cyrus was given authority in the west by his father in 408 BCE, although being recalled at some stage. He helped out with a local Greek struggle and then built up his armies. In 405 or 404, Darius II died and was succeeded by Artaxerxes II, who sent his brother back west at the behest of their mother. Cyrus then led a revolt against his brother in 401, which would end with his death in battle in August of that year. Tangent over, now back to the narrative. Achaeus had been compelled to give up an attack on Syria, and instead went back to Lydia. This was the situation Antiochus now had to deal with. He rebuked Achaeus for taking the title of king, and for colluding with Ptolemy IV. However, for the time being, he decided not to act against his northern rebel. After all, Achaeus didn't have a hope of coming against him yet. Instead, Antiochus turned his eyes south towards the threat he'd already dealt with once before, Egypt and its king Ptolemy IV. Until next time, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future Tangent episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.